The combine is over. The draft and free agency are right around the corner. Do the Rams have a big move up their sleeve? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Travis Rogers. Thanks for making us a part of what you do each and every day. Welcome back to the pod, right? We've had a little bit of a hiatus after the end of the regular season, after the postseason as well. And we're going to start getting cranked up here a little bit. We're going to have a few shows for you every single week. And then before you know it, we're going to be right back here every single day. Going to have a partner when we get started on a more full-time basis. DeMarco Farr is scheduled to join me as well. So we're not only going to have all of your Rams information, but we are going to have a Super Bowl champion as part of the Locked On Rams group coming up in just a little bit. So make sure that you keep subscribed to that feed. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Travis Rogers. You can follow DeMarco as well at DFAR1 on Twitter as well. So you can do all of that. Here's what's coming up on the show today. I want to look a little bit in the rearview mirror. I want to talk a little bit about Jared Goff and his tenure here in Los Angeles, because I think that we've got a very good idea on whether or not we can call that a success based on some other things that have happened in the NFL. So we'll talk about that in just a bit. We'll talk about what the Rams need to get done in the draft before too long, because for the first time in a long time, we're getting closer and closer to the Rams having some high-level picks. We will get into that also. Plus, we're going to start right here. The Rams, of course, have a lot to do. The Rams did a lot last year, and this offseason is quite different than the ones that they've had over the last few years. For the first time in a very long time, and even going back to the season where the Rams were 9-7 and missed the playoffs, the only other time in Sean McVay's career where he did not make the postseason, the Rams did not need a full overhaul. The Rams did not need to tear it down to the studs, to the foundation, and start all over again and say, okay, what's our most important thing? They had the bones of a very good team. And sure as you know what, the very next year, they were right back in it. 2 years later, they win the Super Bowl. That is maybe not what they have right now. What they have right now is a little bit more of a traditional NFL problem, which is your best players are getting old. You're not particularly deep. You have a lot of very expensive guys at the top of your payroll. And some of the moves that you've made over the last year or so have not borne a great deal of fruit, and you've not won a bunch of games. So how do you get out of where they were last year, which was a 5-win team? How do you get back to where they've been previously, which is a team that wins a whole heck of a lot more than they lose, and a team that ends up on in the postseason? Well, obviously you need to draft well. Obviously you need to acquire free agents that are going to impact your team in a positive way. But the other way you can do it is kind of sell off some of the things that maybe you already have. Now, we've seen Bobby Wagner get released last week officially, about 2 weeks ago unofficially. We know that Jalen Ramsey has been on the trade block really since the end of this season. And there's been all sorts of whispers and rumors, and Jalen Ramsey has put some cryptic stuff on social media. The Rams really have not gone out of their way to say that he is going to be coming back. So I think this gives you an indication that it's likely that he may move on. Okay. I mean, if that's what it is, that's what it is. What do you get in return, I think, is the question with that. But let's talk about something else that I think is a good idea. The question, of course, is what do you get for this other player? Allen Robinson has reportedly asked the team to seek a trade. The Rams have given him permission to seek a trade, which makes all sorts of sense. This was one of those things that I think probably keeps general managers up at night, probably keeps head coaches up at night. This idea of, we thought this was going to work. There was no indication that it wasn't going to work. This was a move that pretty much everybody that follows the NFL assumed would be a positive move in the right direction. And it just wasn't. Like, what did we miss? Allen Robinson coming to this team a year ago, more or less about a year from right now, was, oh my gosh, they did it again. They went out and got one of the best players at his position. They've upgraded a position. They've got more offensive weapons. You put him together with Cooper Kupp, and you put him together with Odell Beckham Jr. and et cetera, all the players that we've talked about quite a bit, Van Jefferson. And okay, yeah, Robert Woods is the odd man out. He's got to go, but Allen Robinson is an upgrade. Wasn't true. It just simply wasn't true. It never worked. There were virtually zero examples of it looking like, oh, okay, there it is. That's what I thought the Rams were going to look like when they put this thing together. It didn't work. Allen Robinson's season was, I'll stop short of a bust, but not by much. He didn't finish the season. He got hurt. And when he was there, he had virtually zero impact on this team. When he was there, he was a complete non-factor. Matthew Stafford and he never developed that rapport that you were hoping you would see, because the rapport that came along with Cooper Kupp was virtually instantaneous. The rapport that he had with Robert Woods was very, very good. He and Odell Beckham Jr. got on the same page incredibly quickly when Odell came over to the team in the middle of the year. So Allen Robinson being unable to do that, it's very unlikely that that was a Matthew Stafford problem. It's very unlikely that that was a Sean McVay problem or an offensive problem. It was an Allen Robinson problem. He was not getting open frequently. They were not looking at him frequently. He was not getting in the end zone. I heard it from a bunch of people during training camp, that back corner fade, they're going to kill guys with that. Well, nobody got killed for lack of a better expression. This was something that just never connected, never landed. Now, what do you get for him? Probably not much, right? If you are one of the 31 other teams in the NFL looking for a wide receiver, there's something there. He's an NFL player. He is a Pro Bowl caliber player previously in his career. He wasn't last season. He's coming off of an injury. You know that the Rams are looking to move on from him. So, he's an incredibly distressed asset. So I don't know what sort of haul he gets coming back. But I think the flip side of it is regardless, it's time to move on. You're going to have Cooper Kupp. You're going to have Van Jefferson, and let's see what you get from there, because the Rams are going to have a weird season. They might be good. They might not. And I think that's what's interesting with this group for the first time in the Sean McVay era. I think we're going to get an idea of where they are early in the season. Like, is this a team that's rebuilding and maybe looking to the future with a guy like Caleb Williams, which we'll talk about on the pod at some point? Or is this just hey, look, we just got to nibble around the edges, fix the offensive line, get some pass rush outside of Aaron Donald, and let's go? I don't know how much closer Allen Robinson gets you to that, but I would not expect him to be a big part of this team moving forward. He was not a big part of this team last year as well. A classic, everybody had a good idea. Everybody executed the idea appropriately, and it just simply did not work. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about where the Rams go in the draft. What sort of holes do they need to fill, and where can they look to fill them exactly? Okay, that's coming up next on Locked On Rams. But first, let's talk about our pals at Built Bar, right? It feels nice to talk about Built Bar again. If you are looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all that fat and calories, you're trying to eat nice and healthy and stay and look good and all that stuff, you got to try a Built Bar. It's the best way to do it, right? Maybe after the holidays, you were going crazy and doing all those sorts of things. This is the way you do it. Lead a little healthier this year, be a little bit better each and every day. You got to try Built, right? With Built, healthy is actually tasty. They're so delicious, you're not even going to think that they're good for you. You're probably going to look at the round and go, really, this is good for me? It is. It's perfect for all of your New Year's resolutions. And what makes them so good? Well, they just taste great, right? They're covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, you heard me correctly. 100% real chocolate. There's all sorts of great flavors. There's peanut butter brownie. There's coconut almond. That's my favorite one. There's churro. Go and look, and you will find something that I guarantee you like. They're all pretty good, quite honestly. I'm not sure how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better, they're healthy. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of herd meat. You can get them now at Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. You heard me. Walmart. Head to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. Get a 4-pack of cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs, whatever you're into. So if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Travis Rogers. You can follow me on Twitter at Travis Rogers. It's a good way to do that. Not only am I hosting your Locked On Rams pod, I also host the Rams pre, half, and post-game show. I've been doing that for all 7 seasons that the Rams have returned here to Los Angeles. Looking forward to our 8th season and kind of want to get back into it, right? Like it's funny with the Rams in my run with this team, because the first year with Jeff Fisher was pretty terrible. They were a bad football team, and not only a bad football team, they were a boring football team. Then Sean McVay shows up. I don't have to run down the resume for Sean McVay. He was terrific and is terrific, and I'm thrilled that he's back and he's going to continue to coach the Rams for the foreseeable future. But this year is a little bit different. This is the first time that Sean McVay had a bad team. This is the first time that Sean McVay had a losing season. This is the first time that Sean McVay had a lot of stuff go wrong and he didn't quite know how to fix it. Well, I'm going to give you some deep cut inside football stuff here. You know how you fix it quicker than anything else? Get better players who stay healthy and play better. And that's what the Rams need to do. And that's why with the draft coming up here before too long, I think that the Rams are going to be active in a way that maybe we haven't seen in quite some time. The Rams have operated in the draft very differently than most of the other teams. And I think I saw some other teams kind of try to copy their blueprint, and, to some success and to others, not so much. Looking at you, Denver, with what you did with Russell Wilson. But the Rams have basically said, here, you take our draft picks and we're going to take your players. We're going to take your NFL proven commodities and use them to win games right now. You take the picks and try to figure out what's going to happen down the road. I think you're going to see them morph back into a more traditional team simply because they have so many different holes that they need to fill. Before, the Rams would have, something over here. We need a wide receiver, or we need help in the secondary, or we need a linebacker, or whatever it may be. And they would go get a specific player to fix that need and pay the cost with draft picks. Now, when you've got needs all over the field, you can't fill them with other guys' players. You don't have enough draft picks to pay the cost. So I think you're going to see them use their picks, but I think perhaps even more interestingly, you're going to see them use their picks to get more picks, right? The Rams have a high second-round pick. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw them trade that pick away to get a later second-round pick and even more picks later in the draft, whether those are 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th-round draft picks along the way. The Rams need picks. It's kind of flipped 180 degrees in the opposite direction, whereas before, we don't have a ton of needs at the NFL level. We need players right now. Not true anymore. You need a lot of help on the offensive line. You probably need another wide receiver. You definitely need a pass rush companion to go with Aaron Donald. If Jalen Ramsey does in fact get moved, and again, these are probably more draft picks coming back in, you're going to need to draft a corner. You probably still need some help in your secondary. You probably still need help at linebacker. And here's the other thing. You probably need to draft a quarterback. You probably need to go and find somebody. I'm not saying to use a high pick, but we've seen a lot of guys and a lot of other places become useful NFL players that are not just late 6th, 7th round guys or free agent acquisitions or guys that you found in other random leagues across the world or across the country. You might need to have somebody that is of NFL caliber. We saw last year was weird, and kind of a couple things happening at the same time. You have a very, very good NFL quarterback in Matthew Stafford, but he missed a good chunk of the time. Let's say that while Stafford was playing, the Rams continued to win. Your backup comes in. You need to play at least 500 football. Well, unfortunately, John Wolford, Bryce Perkins really showed that they might not be capable of doing that. Baker Mayfield, we'll see whether or not he comes back. It's seemingly less and less likely that he might, but it was a lot better with him. He's an NFL quarterback. Now, we could go around the block 100 different times about whether or not he's a good NFL quarterback. I think he's probably slightly below average, but he's an NFL quarterback, right? Those other guys, they may or may not be, and probably the second thing. They need to draft a quarterback. They need to fill a whole bunch of positions, and they need depth at those positions. This is a totally different attack, philosophy, whatever you want to say in the draft. And I think you may see a couple of things go on. Number one, that you're developing, that this is not something that you have to do to throw in right now to go turn a 5-win team into a 12-win team. That this may be a let's just kind of keep our powder dry for a minute. I don't know if they know which direction they want to go with that at this moment. Do we try to run this right back again because Sean McVay is back, because Aaron Donald's getting older, Matthew Stafford's getting older, Cooper Kupp is actually, believe it or not, at this stage in his career, one of those guys that you got to think about how many more years will he be at an elite level, and do you go for it again, or is it time to really look at this and say, all right, we got to start all over again. We got to really kind of go back to the beginning of this thing and go from there. These are the questions that I think will start to be answered when you see what they do in the draft. They're going to draft offensive linemen. They're going to draft pass rushers. They're going to draft a quarterback. But beyond that, and how high they do and how aggressive they are, and do they trade back to grab picks? What do you get for Allen Robinson? What do you get for Jalen Ramsey? All of these will kind of start to inform their decisions on what they do next. All right, I want to take a look back at the era of Jared Goff and how he did in Los Angeles. And I think maybe we did not appreciate him nearly enough for what he actually brought to this franchise. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Click that subscribe button in your podcast feed so you get it every single day. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to get back to this on a more regular basis sooner than later. We're going to have a few for you here and there, so make sure that you continue to subscribe to that pod so you can talk Rams football as much as you can. But DeMarco and I will be back full time before you know it, cranked up and ready to go. I want to talk about Jared Goff for a second, not because Jared Goff is a member of the Rams anymore, not because he didn't do a good job in Detroit, which he has, but there was something that took place in the NFL a couple of days ago that I think, at least for me, kind of made me reassess the Jared Goff era. The Commanders released Carson Wentz. Okay, Carson Wentz is now available to any team that would like to take a chance on him. It's almost certain that he will be a backup somewhere in the league, if at all, right? His days as a starting quarterback, at least in the short term, are probably over. Whether he can work his way back into it or not, time will tell. But when I saw that that Wentz was released, it made me think of Goff because, just like Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf and any other quarterbacks that are drafted right next to each other at the top of the draft, they're always going to be compared relative to the other player. And Jared Goff went number one, Carson Wentz went number two, and Goff comes to the Rams and looks terrible, right? Not just bad, but terrible. Maybe, oh my gosh, he can't play at all. What have they done to this franchise? And simultaneously, Carson Wentz comes in and looks really, really good. In that second year, Carson Wentz looks like an MVP candidate. Now, of course, we know what happened after that. Carson Wentz gets hurt actually at the Coliseum against the Rams. Nick Foles comes in, wins the Super Bowl MVP, and Carson Wentz's time in Philadelphia really starts to deteriorate quickly after that. He goes from there, he goes to Indianapolis, where it's a complete disaster. He goes from Indianapolis to Washington, where it's a complete disaster. And now he's out, right? He will land somewhere, but this is something that he is just looking for his next job. Here's what Jared Goff did. Jared Goff comes in as the number one overall pick. Massive expectations. Massive fix this franchise. And it kind of did. Obviously, Sean McVay is the guy that really turned this around. Jared Goff comes in as the number one pick and a terrible opening act where he goes 0-7 in his first season as a starter. Looks dreadful. Comes in with everybody going, hey, how quickly can we get rid of this guy? Sean McVay's not his, the Goff's not McVay's guy. How goes to the Pro Bowl. Next year, he goes to the Super Bowl. Next year after that, they miss. Next year after that, they go back to the playoffs again. Now, was it perfect? Absolutely not. Did his teammates ever turn on him? No. Did he ever give up? No. Did you ever hear those whispers that people around him were looking at him like, no, this guy isn't the guy. This is never going to be a guy that people buy into. No. Sean McVay seemed to really like him, but just couldn't find a way to get him to stop making the mistakes he made. You go into Detroit, and it was one of these, okay, well, we'll hold on to him until we get our high draft picks, and then we'll pick a different quarterback. Well, that never really happened. He gave the Lions the best season that they've had in a very long time a year ago. He's not the second coming of Dan Marino or John Elway. I'm not saying that. No one's going to be looking to trade Jared Goff or Josh Allen to go get their hands on Jared Goff. The point is, he came in a very difficult situation, fell behind the guy that was drafted right behind him, was looked at as the problem, and he wasn't. He wasn't great, but he was much better than I think anybody ever gave him credit for, and I think he deserves to be acknowledged as such. Carson Wentz has been a catastrophe minus that second year in Philadelphia. Jared Goff is a good NFL quarterback. Is he a great one? No. Is he going to play a long time? Heck yeah, he is. He's kind of right in the middle of the league. There's a lot of guys worse than Jared Goff. There's a handful of guys, maybe a handful of guys that are a lot better than him, but he's going to be a quarterback in this league for a long time. I don't know if you could say the same thing about Carson Wentz. Just seeing him get released reminded me of that all over again. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rams. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL Draft Pod. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.